Okay. And so, again, everyone, welcome to Embracing Grief with Purpose and Understanding. Our facilitator today is Walter Williams. He is a practicing psychotherapist, life coach, and dedicated advocate for mental health and well being. Throughout his career, he has facilitated over 50 workshops and has contributed as a podcast guest and extra or expert panelist on topics related to mental health and well being. And he is the founder of Think and Grow, and he champions a holistic approach to well being, emphasizing mental fortitude, physical development, and spiritual uplifting. At this time, I will pass it on to Walter to facilitate today's peer learning session.
Right on. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. I appreciate it. Welcome all. I'm gonna share my screen now so that we can get rolling. We can get rolling. Let's see. Can you see my full screen?
Yes, sir.
Perfect, perfect. All right. Greetings all. Thank you for the warm introduction. I'm gonna jump right in because I know if you like me, you've been working all day. You probably got something cooking, something you're looking forward to eating or relaxing. So I'm just hope to depart some information, have some fruitful discussion and get out your way. Just to get started, for those who are here, first off, thank you for being here. But I'm just wondering if you can in the chat for me, just maybe share one word of how you feeling, maybe one word of what you're looking forward to, just to invite your voice into space. I know we're virtual, we're not in person, so it's hard to kind of corral us. But if in the chat you can just put one word of how you're feeling today, or one word to sum up your week, or maybe one word for what you're looking forward to: rest, food, relaxation, maybe wine. Who knows if that's your forte? Ms. Juanita, I'm sorry, you say something? Relax, optimistic. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, Tracy. Is that had a relaxed week, or are you looking to get some relaxation? Looking forward to the weekend and getting outdoors. Yes, if y'all got that 80, 90-degree weather, take advantage because we know the winter is coming. Optimistic, relaxed in the moment. I love that. Being present. That's it. That's it. Any others? Any others? I had a busy week. I would say busy to describe mine. Just it's busy, busy for sure. Any others? Any others? Okay, cool. Well, thank you. Just to get us grounded, and I hope that the word that you use is the word that you lean into, whether it's being optimistic, being relaxed, looking forward to things, which brings us some excitement and joy. That's amazing. But let's get started. Let's dive into our discussion for today. We're just going to talk about some grief, understand it. We're going to talk about building some resilience, and then I'm going to take us a little bit further. This is my second time presenting this. So if you're hearing this information again, it's just validation of what you heard the first time. But I may move slightly fast through some of it. But seeing that I'm seeing some new names and faces, I'll take my time to make sure we understand things. And then I'm going to leave a little area for us to have some discussion. So if you're comfortable and open to it, would love to hear your voice, hear your experience, your expertise, as we are in this space, because it is a peer learning session, and I do think learning from each other is such a powerful way to be better and to grow. Um, so grief, what is grief? Grief is something that we all experience in some form, some shape, some fashion. I think a lot of times when we hear about grief or think about grief, it's usually in a form of death, the loss of a loved one, loss of an animal. But grief can also come with life transition, maybe acquiring a disability over the years, maybe resigning from a job, moving into a different job, maybe leaving your hometown and moving to a different. It could be going from being single to being married. All of these transitions, all of these changes can bring about a form of grief, if that we can feel, where it's sadness, where it can be some worry, some wonder, if you will, some anxiety. Everybody's grief is uniquely different, because how people manage their grief and how they engage with their grief varies. You have some people who are often stuck in their grief or stuck in that state of depression, not knowing how to move forward, not being accepting of what is, being stuck on what was. You have some people who are able to experience transition, experience life, and bounce back a lot faster. I think sometimes society tell us that we have to move on, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, faster than we may be ready to. But grief just looks different. My therapist years ago, when I was meeting with her, helped me to realize that I was experiencing grief as I was preparing to resign from a job, like my first real like big kid job. I was a high school counselor, and I had made this commitment. Oh, actually, I had two jobs. I was working quite a bit, and I was looking to resign from both of them within the same year, which was kind of crazy saying it out loud as I'm reflecting on it with you in the moment. But I was really anxious. I was really nervous because I feel like I was letting my students down. I feel like I was abandoning my team. I feel like I wasn't keeping my word, and I didn't realize that I was grieving that detachment, that disconnection from that identity. And that over time, I began to learn that I had to give myself permission to feel that because my feelings were real. And a lot of people didn't understand why I was so slow to just put my letter of resignation in. But now it's understanding. So everybody's grief is uniquely different. There is this connection with our mind and our heart when it comes to grief. When we are finding ourselves suffering emotionally or having unhealthy feelings that we haven't processed or talked through, it can start to show up in our body. There is that when we ruminate on something that may be unhealthy, we may find ourselves being constricted in our breathing. We may find ourselves having aches and pains in our body. We might find ourselves being tense, unable to really relax. Quite frankly, we might start to find ourselves getting sick, having cold-like symptoms, etc. So if we're not careful, what's on our mind will show up in our body. And I'm just here to challenge us to begin to think about how are we thinking about grief? How are we processing it? What's our relationship with it? And not that how do we move on from the change, the transition, but how do we move with it? Okay. When we think about grief in the heart, there are some physical impacts that comes with it, as I was alluding to. Could be a heightened sense of blood pressure. You may notice a change in your heart rate over time, and other cardiovascular issues that you may feel. For me, when I'm in a state of grief, I'm often quiet, and I'm often like in my head, just trying to play out different scenarios and trying to figure out how to make things work. I'm playing what if scenarios often, and what I notice it began to do, it disrupts my sleep. It disrupt my eating pattern. I didn't realize that when I was grieving the disconnection from the job I was at, like my appetite has changed. I wasn't motivated to do anything, which signaled to me that maybe I was experiencing some depressive type symptoms. And my body was just becoming was falling in line with what was on my mind at that time. So grief can begin to show up in ways that, if we're not careful, can begin to harm us. And broken heart syndrome is one of those ways that it can. In the previous session that I did, I talked about, my sister who transitioned in 2021. I believe she died of a broken heart. She died April 17th, which is the same day my mom died. And I knew around that time has always been a difficult season for her. When the month of April hit, her drinking increased. She began to cry. She began to ruminate on things that her and mom didn't work out. She carried a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, a lot of unprocessed emotions that she ruminated on. And I believe the day that my mom died and the day that she died, my mom came to get her. That's how I've been able to reframe it in my mind to make peace with that situation. But I truly believe that the broken heart she had from losing our mom is what sped up her transition. I almost wanted to think that the alcohol had a play in it, and to a degree it did, but it was just the agony that she felt on a consistent basis that she just didn't know how to work through and work with. And being a therapist, I would encourage her, hey, talk with someone. And where I'm from and in my community, talking to someone means you're crazy or something's wrong. And she missed an opportunity to really open up and to begin to heal her broken heart. And I just want to encourage someone today that if there are things you're carrying, now in the moment of relaxation, in the moment that we're in, is the time to begin to heal that. Because why cause yourself to suffer over something that you just don't have any control over? Right. Sometimes our grief can disrupt our self-care routines, where we get out of rhythm with the things that brings us joy. I was talking to a guy the other day, and he was saying when his sister transitioned, he stopped singing, he stopped dancing, he stopped being creative. And really, it led to him losing his identity because a lot of his joy was wrapped up in that. And the loss of his sister took him out of what he was typically do to bring himself joy. And I was just helping him to realize, like, man, it's those things that gave you that spark before your sister transition. So how do we keep that in your repetition in your repertoire so that you can still have some joy and do things for you and allow the grief to move with you and you don't feel like you have to move on. Because oftentimes, people feel like, because this has happened, my life shut down and I have to go into isolation mode. And sometimes that's the wrong time to do so because our thoughts can get the best of us. And sometimes our feelings can get the best of us, and feelings aren't always facts. And if we're not careful, we can find ourselves getting deeper and deeper into depression. And now we're dealing with grief on top of an acute sense of depression, on top of isolation, losing identity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when we think about grief in the heart, I really want us to be mindful that it can show up in our body if you're not careful. And the very thing that we're grieving others over, we can begin to embody. And then what position does that put our families in and our loved ones in, right? So just something to think about along that way. Recognizing our grief, there are different signs emotionally, physically, behaviorally. When we talk about emotional signs, it's just that persistent sadness. Just can't get out of that funk. Sometimes it's that guilt that we carry, that shoulda, woulda, coulda. Oh, I wish I had this, or I wish I would have said that. Sometimes irritability, being short-winded, short-tempered, being snappy, about things that you probably would have a bit more patience for, or even numbness. I think in certain environments, we can become numb to the things that's happening around us. And if we're not careful, we can really, really, really disrupt and cause us to project unhealthy feelings onto other people. When we think about physical signs, exhaustion, patterns in your sleep changes, maybe tightness in your body, tension in your body, as I mentioned. When we think about behaviorally, this feeling of not wanting to be bothered, just wanting to be left alone. I'm someone who believes that it's good to have some alone time, but when we have unhealthy thoughts that we're not processing or emotions that are quite complicated, being in isolation becomes the devil's playground, if you will. That's when those unhealthy thoughts can kick in and it can send us into a dark place if we're not careful. We can start to distract ourselves with unhealthy things. Sometimes, and the work that I do with clients who are grieving. I have a gentleman now, who's dealing with a lot of grief, where his nephew transitioned and his dad got diagnosed with cancer and recently transitioned. So he was like, I'm drinking every day and I'm smoking every day, instantly shifted himself from the healthy routine he had where he was going to the gym. He's a chef, so he was cooking. And just like that, he began to distract himself to try to cope, only perpetuating behaviors and emotions that are unhealthy. So just trying to get him back to center and to get back to the things that he enjoyed. But as leaders, as providers, we're not exempt from grief. It's our experience of personal loss, our experience of transition, our experience of change that qualifies us to be able to stand and connect with clients, connect with community members, connect with family members, and be representation that you can move with your grief, and not feel like you have to just get over it. Many of providers, many caregivers, sometimes we carry unacknowledged grief. When we think about maybe losing clients, losing patients, burnout, systemic barriers, racial barriers, gender barriers, and whatnot. Um, all of that can cause us to start to feel a sense of grief or a sense of disconnection in the environments we're in. And if we're not careful, we too, even in our leadership roles or in our positions, can begin to numb ourselves or isolate ourselves and just go through the motions. So as providers, as leaders, as caregivers, we have to be very in tune with ourselves. So I love the comment of being relaxed in the moment, being in tune with ourselves in the moment to know what's needed and what's not. Because if I'm not good, how can I show up for you, right? If I'm not taking care of me and checking my blind spots and acknowledging where I am, how can I pour from something that I don't have, right? So we're not exempt as leaders. And I just want to encourage us, for those who are caregivers, those who are healthcare providers, to check in with yourself, where are you? How are you along that way? When we're thinking about building resilience, it's not always not the easy thing to do. Is that it's being able to find ways to have some self-compassion. I think a lot of times we are quick to give other people grace. We quick to give other people some understanding, but not a lot of times we get that to ourselves. And as many of us may know, sometimes we are our own worst critic. And if we're not careful, that it's that inner critic that starts to cause us to bring up them unhealthy feelings and that unhealthy thought. So just being able to treat yourself with kindness, right? Self-compassion is the practice of just treating yourself with the same kindness, the same care, the same understanding that you would offer to a friend who may be in a difficult situation. So is you acknowledging your suffering just without judgment, right? I can acknowledge that I'm sad, but I'm not judging myself because I'm sad, right? I can acknowledge that I'm hurt, so I'm not questioning why am I hurt because this is just the feeling I have, and just as this feeling come, this feeling can go, right? And recognizing that the feelings we have and the experience, they're just a part of the human experience, right? So being able to respond to ourselves with gentleness rather than self-criticism, I think a lot of times helps us to move along in our journey along the way. Connection. I can't tell you how powerful it is, and I thank y'all for being in the space, just to be in a shared space to say, hey, this is what I'm going through, this is what I've experienced, and to hear someone else say, I get you. I've been there too. I see you. I can resonate with that, right? Because sometimes, in grief and transition, we can feel alone. I will feel like it's just us, or am I the only one dealing with this? Am I the only one experiencing this? So being able to connect with others and to talk about what you're experiencing and how you're working through things can be the very thing that potentially saves someone else's life. I can't tell you how many times I didn't open up about grief that I've experienced or life changes that has been the catalyst for someone else to be motivated, to be encouraged, or to rectify something that may have been broken or shattered in a different way. Because it's through your testimony that other people can be healed. Mindfulness, right? It's just the practice of being fully present and engage in the moment. So that's why I shout out to the relax in the moment. And that's just being aware of your thoughts and your feelings, your body sensations, and the things that's going on around you. I do think we are now in a time where everything is fighting for our attention, especially when we're in a virtual world, because you can be listening, you can be cooking, doing laundry, checking your email. So a lot of things are fighting for our attention. And I argue that we have to continue to create space just for some solitude, for some silence, for some mindfulness. And I think one of the most beautiful ways to do so is just to go for a walk. So I just want to say they're looking forward to the weekend, and I just want to encourage you, if you're able and willing, leave a phone at home if you feel comfortable doing so, and just taking a stroll through your neighborhood. If it's a neighborhood that you can walk through, admire the trees, feel the wind, embrace the sun, listen to the birds, hopefully kids are playing, right? Just take it all in and observe it. Because when we can observe something, it doesn't allow us to create an attachment to it or emotion. It just allows it to just be. You're just aware, you're just taking it in. And I think sometimes we have to do the same thing for ourselves. We almost have to step outside of ourselves to observe ourselves, if that makes sense. What am I? Let me put it this way: thinking about what I'm thinking about. Why am I thinking this way? Right? Questioning why am I feeling this way? Where is this coming from? Noticing how it's showing up in the body. Because when we can be mindful of it, or we can be aware of it, you can do something about it. So I just want to encourage you all to think about increasing ways that you can be mindful. Even in the moment, sometimes our breath becomes a way that we can be mindful. Just taking a deep breath and being thankful for that breath, right? Knowing that we connected to a source, that we all connected to the same source where we can exchange this breath with, right? Routine. I push this a lot because when you have a routine, it gives you structure. It can minimize unpredictability, especially if you can open your day up with a strong routine, close your day with a solid routine, which allows you in the morning, if you're someone who's an early riser, it gives you an opportunity to spend some time with yourself. allow the day to come to you and you not rush to the day. A lot of my clients who deal with a lot of anxiety, many of them, they got to work at 8:30, they up at 8 o'clock, try to be out the door by 8:15 to be at work at 8:30. Like how you doing that? I don't know. I'm someone who used to be like that in my earlier years. And as I've gotten older, I've found the value in just getting up and just enjoying a quiet moment, which allowed me to meditate, allows me to think. The vibrations and the energy of our communities aren't as vibrant, early in the morning. So having that routine helps us to manage our anxiety and to be prepared to take on the stress of the day. If you're a caregiver, if you're a mental health provider, if you're a healthcare provider, whatever your role may be, if you're a business owner, the stress is going to come, whether we want it to or not. But it's how do you prepare yourself to take that on so that once you get it, you can meet it with grace, right? You can meet it with poise, you can meet it with understanding. And I believe that if we're rushing into our day, sometimes we project our anxiety onto people and things may not go how we may want them to. But when we can ease into and allow it to come to us, we move with it with a different with a graceful walk, right? We respond with a little more peace and a little more calmness, if you will. And the same as you check out of your day, sometimes reflecting on your day at the end, maybe writing your gratitude statement, maybe it's just sitting down, being thankful that you made it through the day, whatever it is, that works for you, lighting a candle. I think creating some structures helps us to manage everything that's in the middle. So when we talk about building emotional resilience, especially in the form of grief, I think creating those routines helps us to just manage our emotions as life continue to go on. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully y'all still with me, 'cause I know I'm just talking and rolling right now. Um, when we're thinking about loss and we're thinking about leadership, right? Our journey through grief, it can really transform our personal pain and the things we've experienced on a personal and deep level into the work that we do. I stand before you as a man who I didn't experience and lost and seen a lot. I was 6 years old and I lost my best friend who was killed. And that was my first time experiencing grief of that sort. And then my parents transitioned when I was 14 and 15. Then my older brother and sister died in 21 and then 2023. And then I had no run of water at times. Just a lot of loss that was happening in my life. But it's because of those experiences and me being able to sit with that and work through that that allows me to show up in the work that I do for others, right? Allow me to hold space for others. It allows me to stand confident in what I say because I'm someone with lived experience. And as leaders, you know, we're not just leaders for the sake of being leaders, but it's the empathy we're able to provide to others. I can give you grace because I know what it's like to hurt like that, right? I can give you grace because I know what it feels like to have to work through something. When I speak with my man clients who too have lost their moms, they just feel seen, they just feel heard. And when I share with them, like I understand, I'm someone who lost my mom too. It's almost like a weight just drop off of them because now they're sitting across with someone who gets it, who understands, and who can work with them through that. I have a gentleman now on my caseload. When we first got together, he was dealing with grief of his mom. He couldn't even look at his mom picture. This how heavy his grief was. He couldn't look at a picture. He didn't want to talk about stories. And we fast forward to maybe 2 years later. Now he looks at his mom picture and he smiles and he find it to be joyful. And he was telling me about a moment when he was really angry and he looked at his mom picture and it helped to disrupt that anger. Right. So being able to turn that pain into a purposeful act, it's just a beautiful thing. It's just a beautiful thing. And as leaders and as providers, it's through our empathy, it's through our advocacy, it's through our human connection that we're able to use what we've experienced, and how we've learned from these experiences through our reflection and through the perceptions that we've been able to have that allow us to guide others, right, with wisdom, with clarity, with understanding, along the way. So you being able to reflect on your grief and your transitions, it strengthens your emotional intelligence, right? And it's very critical and crucial for our communication because if I can listen to your heart, we can connect, right? And I think we are in a time where artificial connection is real, where you feel like you're connected to someone because you like a picture, you follow them, you sharing it. But human connection, I don't think will ever die, even in the time of AI, right? So being able to continue to find ways and find space to allow the loss and the grief and the experience we have to be what we need to be the catalyst to allow us to show up. So this, in other words, helps us to learn how to reframe our emotional experiences as leaders, as assets, and not necessarily as liabilities. Because yeah, if somebody asks, what qualifies you to do this work, your experience does. What qualifies you to do the work? I've done the work on me, which qualifies me to be able to stand before others and help them do the work on themselves, right? So this encourages authenticity in our leadership, and it helps us to build a really, really deeper relationship of trust with the folks we work with and within ourselves, for sure. I'm gonna keep moving. I'm gonna keep moving. Hopefully that makes sense. Um, I want to submit to you today. I'm big on language, and as a mental health provider, I have, I'm qualified to diagnose and things like that. And I was meditating on what I wanted to talk about today with you, and this post-traumatic growth was something that was heavy in my spirit. If you're familiar with post-traumatic stress disorder, right, that's this acute experience you have from an event, whether it's directly or indirectly, because we can have PTSD from direct experiences if you're in it. Let's say you're in a gunfire, or let's say you were in a fire. Let's say you discovered a loved one and no longer breathing, or it can be indirect, where we can watch something, right? We can watch a police killing or some sort on the news and have an impact. We can hear something. It can be the wildfires in Los Angeles that can have us in a way. So PTSD can come from direct or indirect, and it's this persistence, this constant rumination, this fear, this anxiety, this uncertainty that one has. And I was thinking about that, and I think grief can cause us to ebb through some PTSD type symptoms. And I just wanted to take the power back out of that by considering post traumatic growth. Right. This is just a span to this, right? And to me, the post traumatic growth, which is, after a hard event, we grow. Because it is true that after hard events, we can have stress, but I also think through that stress, if we're not careful, can kill us and hurt us and harm us. But I also think what I'm speaking today is to the growth side of things. And it can occur after adversity, you know and with this, it can cause us to have a great appreciation of life. Knowing that cardiovascular disease runs heavy in my family, high blood pressure, strokes, diabetes. This has forced me to take my health just a little bit more serious. I still enjoy my sweets and whatnot, but it has challenged me to be more intentional with what I consume. It challenged me to be more consistent with how I move my body, how I check in with my providers. I was able to do a biometric screening a couple of weeks ago, and everything came back clear. And I was like, thank God, right? I was just happy because I'm always worried, would this be the time that I learn something is off? Because I know genetically things have trickled down to my family. Yet I made the decision to be intentional about how I live my life and what I do, so that I can beat cardiovascular disease. But it makes me find joy in the small things, in the small moments, right? Post-traumatic growth allows us to have improved relationships. So sometimes transition in shifts and grief can bring us closer to people. Sometimes it's through those hard things that people get a little tighter, feel a lot more connected along the way. My sister, who's right above me, like we're closer now than ever. When we were kids, she used to bully me and try to push me around and everything. She still, when she introduced me, this is my little brother, I had to let her know, why you gotta keep little bro on me? Like I'm a grown man now. Like just say I'm your brother, but I'm always her little brother. But our relationship now is probably tighter as it's ever been, and it's through the loss we've had to endure together that we've been able to connect and build and support each other along our way. It can become a way to rediscover your strength, right? I think sometimes we don't know the strength we have until we have to use it. We have to determine and decide that the resilience that's in us got to come up out of us. And you have what you need. I guarantee if each of us just take a moment and think about all of what we went through and what we've experienced up until this point in our life, and just ask ourselves, how did we get here? Just how? How did I make it through that? Right? Like how did I survive that? Why me? Or why not me? Right? It all depends on how we choose to look at it. This also can help us just develop a deeper spiritual meaning, where we feel like we have a greater purpose in life. And I believe through my experiences, like, now my task is to ease the pain of other people, to help journey along with them as they're navigating their pain, helping them to move with their experiences. And I feel like they just got to get over it. And I think that's what helps a lot of people to feel seen, heard, and validated in so many ways. So a prompt that I would like for you to consider is, after my life, after my loss, I'm sorry, I never expected to blank, but I found myself blank, right? After my loss, I never expected to be this resilient, but I found myself being very resilient. After my loss, I never expected to be able to show up for others and support them, but I found myself being encouraging, being motivating, being supportive in so many ways. So I just want to encourage you to continue to think about, how through your grief, through your transition, through your changes, how you're growing, how you're changing, how you're evolving, and all that good stuff. I see some stuff going on in the chat, but I can't see the chat, so I don't know if there's some comments or questions. So, Ms. Jackson, if you can keep me posted, definitely let me know. But I'm gonna keep rolling for the
Yeah, just
time.
some folks coming in, joining everyone, thanks. And then Nader, when you checked in, she was just letting you know that this is very helpful and thank you.
Right on. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here, and welcome to everybody that's joining. I'm just moving and grooving right now, so I can't see. But I'm happy that you're here. Hopefully something said to move us along. But I'm gonna keep rolling. I'm gonna keep rolling. And I think I'm at nope, I'm right here. The myth of moving on versus moving with. And I alluded to this a bit earlier. I think, there is pressure in our society to just move on. I'll get over it. To just bounce back quickly and you'll be okay. Especially when we in roles of leadership, right? As caregivers, as providers and whatnot. But the truth is we don't move on from meaningful loss. We don't move on from meaningful experiences that we had. My time as a high school counselor was a meaningful experience. I literally watched kids come in from their freshman year to they graduate and then go off and do some amazing things. Like that was a meaningful time in my life to work with those young people. But we really learned to move with, right? And when I resigned and told my principal that I was, stepping back and just popping my stuff a little bit, I'm like, you lose me as an employee, but you gain me as a community partner, right? So letting her know that this is hard for me too, but we still gain something as we move with each other, right? As I transition to something new for myself, right? So I do think there's a myth of this idea that we have to move on and society expects us to just get over it. And if anyone ever tell you to get over it, we might want to question that I want to say question that friendship. We may want to be leery of hearing something like that because I don't know if we are able to just get over something. I think we learn to live with things and to learn to move with things, right? Because this mindset can create pressure for us to suppress emotions, and suppressing emotions is just keeping it in. As men, that's what we're good at, right? I think our main two expressions when it comes to emotions, besides the excitement of money, is anger and sex, right? Those two ways of expressing ourselves become the only two vehicles. But there's so many more emotions that we experience, but they're often shut down when we're boys. Boys don't cry, stop, or stop doing that because that's for girls, or man up. Like, how can I man up when I'm only 5 years old, right? I'm just a boy, right? So I think a lot of times when we talk about suppressing emotions, it really becomes unhealthy. And I think for men, when we suppress emotions that we're feeling but don't know how to talk about or shut down, it does start to come out in other unhealthy ways. Maybe in our aggression, maybe in drinking, maybe in other addictions and whatnot. So we have to be very careful with this idea of just moving on because it can, in a way, suggest that that's what we should do. And I don't know. I know for sure, not that I don't know, I know for sure that that's not a healthy move, right? But the reality is that we move with, right? And grief becomes integrated in our lives as we carry both our loss and our love for it, right? Because we can bring that with us. And I think that's what again makes us qualified to do the work. So we don't leave grief behind when we transition or when our loved ones transition. We just learn to build meaningful life around it, right? You still here for whatever reason. You still made it for whatever reason. You still got some work to do. You still got breath in your body for whatever reason, and that's something that you have to discover. But our relationship with the deceased, with old versions of ourselves, or the way the way things were, right? That way of living transforms whether it ends, right? Um, when I think about my grandma, who was an amazing, oh my God, amazing chef. I have a bowl in my house of hers that she used to make her, make all her desserts. And every now and again, I'll try to make a dessert. And keyword is try. But it's just me honoring her spirit, honoring the legacy she left, and just being able to usher in that aroma, of a good cake, right, of a good pie. And it's nowhere near what hers is. But again, we learn to live and allow the loss and the experiences to be transformed in our lives. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Um, that leads into my next point of continuing bonds. When we think about the loss of loved ones, when we think about transitions we've had, when we think about maybe acquired abilities or disabilities or disorders we may have gotten over the years, diagnosis, just trying to find ways to honor the memories, right? Trying to find ways to transform our relationships and to build legacy, I think, are ways that we can continue to bond. When we talk about honoring memories, like that's more ritualistic things, maybe sharing stories, how I'm just sharing with you today, some of the stories of my life, about my loved ones, celebrating special dates. Unlike my sister who would grieve heavy and cope in unhealthy ways, my sister now, what we do is, every year on our parents' birthday or the day that they transition, we'll light a candle. We go out and buy a nice candle to usher in an aroma in this place, right? And we'll just share stories of happy moments. And if we need to cry, we do that. But a lot of times it's of laughter, is of just reflection. So this in a way allows us to usher in the spirit of our loved ones where we start to feel a bit more comforting, right? And it allows us to preserve some meaning. When we think about transforming relationships, right? As I mentioned, like our bonds don't end with the loss we've had. They transform and they grow with us, because those become a part. Those experiences are a part of me and how I stand before you today, right? And even with this, it allows us to begin to think about the legacy we want to live and the purpose that we want to have and the values we want to begin to move with, right? So this can be talking to a loved one in prayer, right? This can be wearing jewelry. It can be cooking a favorite dish, listening to a favorite song. By the way, doing these things can also bring up a type of emotion. It may bring up some sadness. It may make you cry. But know that that's a human experience to have. And as you've been able to honor yourself in that moment. This also can be being creative, with art, with poetry. It can be advocacy work. It could be naming your child. One of the things that I'm doing with my children, I only have one son, but I want my kids to have the names of my siblings, like their middle name be their name, just to keep it alive, right? Just to create a new meaning for it. This could be volunteer for a cause, whatever it may be, whatever it may be. I do think there's ways that we can continue the bonds that we from people and situations we have lost, so that we can continue to carry on along the way. Cool. With that, let's have a little conversation. I done talked a lot, and I'm curious to hear from you. So you got 3 questions here that I'd love for you to chime in on. If you're comfortable with unmuting and inviting your voice into the space, I would love that. Or feel free to put it in the chat. If you want to share something you're not comfortable, we can stop the recording so that we can have create a vulnerable and authentic space where you could just be. But the first question: what's one insight or strength you've gained through loss that influence how you lead, how you show up, or how you care for others? The second question I have: in what ways do you still feel connected to someone or something you've lost? In what ways? And what does moving with grief, rather than moving on from grief, means to you personally at this stage in your life? I would love to hear from you. And if I'll keep my can we put the questions in the chat?
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you wanna stop sharing your screen, I can't copy and paste.
I got them right here. Right
Okay.
here.
Uh,
If someone on the chat.
Anna has her hand up.
Uh, Let me just put them here. Um, but uh-oh, that did not come how I wanted it to. Forgive me.
You can just the
Uh,
slide.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Let's put it in the chat here. But whomever have their hand up, please share.
Yeah. Tawana?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I just wanted to chime in on the first question, what one insight or strength that I gained through the loss. My two youngest kids were killed in Washington, D.C. through a high-speed police chase. But and that was a hard pill to swallow. But what I've learned with grief and the heart is everybody's journey is different. Um, I've learned that it also depends on the relationship of that person that may have passed. And I found healing in assisting and helping other moms who lost children in drive-bys in Washington, D.C. And I was at peace and accepting God's will in him taking both of them at the same time. But when my mom passed, I was dealing with the woulda, shoulda, couldas. I had me and my mom relationship was kind of rocky, but the last 13 years of her life, we had an amazing relationship. Because at that point, when it was rocky, I was like, Lord, if you don't fix our relationship, it just ain't gonna be fixed. And I'm the only girl with all brothers, and my mom loved her sons, but I started taking psychology classes at Bowie University, and I used to go back and tell my mom, you know what, we do not get along because I'm so much like you. And she just would laugh. But after she passed, I with the kids, I was so at peace with them. And I think it was because the Lord allowed me to be a good mom to them and raise them and take good care of them and protected them as much as I could until he called them home. But with my mom, dealing with the woulda, shoulda, couldas, I was questioning myself and asking myself, what could I have done better as a daughter when it came to our relationship? But I thank God for the 13 years of repairing and having that great relationship. So when she passed, I didn't have to deal with grief and guilt, because that'll tear a person up on the inside too. But I found healing through helping others. I still help others, and I just thank God for keeping me mentally, physically, because with the kids, that was so devastating that, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. And when it was just me by myself at night, I was like, Lord, you gotta help me through this because I ain't gonna make it. Like, that was tough. But I thank God because He is amazing, and we don't know when life gonna shift. But I am grateful that I'm still standing. Thank you for letting me share.
Absolutely. And thank you for being vulnerable with that. And definitely my condolences. I hear the strength in your voice. I can hear how you've been able to be empowered by these experiences, which allows you to help other moms, find strength in their voice. So thank you for standing in the gap and allowing your life to be a testimony for others. That's amazing.
Uh, I am a pastor. I was a pastor.
Okay.
I'm retired, but I just appreciate what Tawana said, because everybody does express grief differently.
Mhm.
And I think I developed more compassion for people who are grieving, because I'm the last remaining person in my family. I was a caregiver for my mother, my father, my brothers, and my husband. And so I know what the pain feels like. And it's, and words really, I've learned that you really have to watch what you say to people.
Man of
I
that.
remember my mother-in-law, her mother died when she was like 89. And I was young. We had just been married, and I called myself giving this wisdom. Well, at least you had your mother
Mm.
for 89 years. She lived a full life. I should have just shut up, because the ministry is in your presence. in
Yes.
knowing that people are there for you,
Mhm.
and whatever way you can express that for them. I think it really, I walk with people. I try to walk with people through the valleys that
Mhm.
they go through. And so I always stay in touch with people after the funeral. I go to so many funerals. I've been to like 7 in the last month,
Wow.
just because of my relationships. But it
Mhm.
does help to talk, and I liked what you said about family names.
Mhm.
They're important to keep that legacy.
Absolutely.
My name is Edna. My grandmother's name was Edna. And when I was younger, I couldn't stand it. I said I look like a Jackie or a Barbara or all of that. But now I'm proud of my name.
Yes.
I'm proud of the heritage in knowing who she is. And now I have 3 grown children, real grown children.
Mhm.
And we talk every time we get together. I have to share family stories
I love that.
so they can know who their grandparents and grandparents were. And I think we've lost that over
Mhm.
the years. And I've been blessed to be able to bless people.
Certainly. Certainly.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
You,
Also, we have a comment in the chat as well from Tracy. Tracy says, I feel connected to my mom by strengthening my connection with my siblings. It's 4 of us, and we each take a quarter to honor her in our own ways. So we're guaranteed to meet at least once a month in addition to other celebrations. It has only been a year and a half, so it's really fresh.
wow. Yeah, you're all picking up on something really nice there. Yeah, thank you all for sharing. You know, you're right. Be, being present, just being with someone. Because do we ever have the right words to say? You know, do we ever? And we know that the life and death flows from what we say. And it's what they say, if you ain't got nothing good to say, don't say nothing at all. So sometimes it's just being there, just your presence, just the energy you're able to provide, can be comfort that people need. That's something I've had to learn along the way. I mean, and also, like you're saying, Tracy, finding those meaningful ways to honor the moment and to honor our loved ones. It helps us to stay connected. It helps us to stay grounded. And early on is not easy because grief is heavy. But over time, right? And some would say time heals all wounds, and I want to take that a step deeper by saying, in time, you begin to distance yourself or detach yourself from that pain, right? Not that it ever leave, but you just begin to just get away from it, so it's not as heavy as it used to be. It's not as burdensome as it used to be. If we can begin to think about ways to just detach from things that may be holding us back, to disconnect from things or people or thoughts or beliefs that no longer serve us. It helps us to move along our journey in such a miraculous way. Thank y'all for sharing. Any other thoughts? I love this discussion here. Okay, let's go on once. Um, if I can share, I'll just say, in my leadership, the message that's rooted in my grief is often, um, this it's awful. My message is always the mindset, how you choose to look at something, how you choose to perceive it. I mean, earlier you heard me mention, the day my sister transitioned, that in my mind, when I was sitting there with her, I was like, wow, what's going on? And it was like this sense of calm and comfort that came over me. And I'm like, that must have been my mom, right? 'Cause I remember what it felt like when her presence would be in the room with me, regardless of what she was doing. My mom was involved in some drug activity and things like that, but her presence, to what Reverend Edna saying, that it was very comforting, and I sensed that. So in my mind, in my mind's mind, that gave me the confirmation that if we just choose to shift how we look at something, what we look at begin to change. But I'll stop and keep going with my presentation before I get to preaching, and we already have a reverend in the crowd. Let me share my screen again. Give me a second. Can y'all see this okay? Let me get full screen. When grief becomes a part of our story, our values can serve as a compass to guide us forward in our journey. And that's what I'm hearing many of y'all say today. Right? Loss can often clarify what matters the most to us. It can help us realign with our lives. It can help us to realign with our deepest values and our principles. Because again, sometimes when we go through hard things, it can disconnect us from, the values that matter the most, the people that matters the most. And we can begin to reconnect with our values, the values of compassion, integrity, justice, maybe spirituality, maybe it's health, maybe it's finances, whatever it may be, right? It can help us to reconnect or even find a new value that we may want to embark upon, which this allows us to begin to live with ever more intention. I have a why for my health. When I was in college, I used to just go to the gym, work out so I can look good for spring break. And then after spring break, I'm like, it's over with. I'll do it again next spring break. But once I began to realize that cardiovascular disease runs deep in my family and what I eat matters, how I move my body matters. So my goal, my purpose for my health is just to be cardiovascular disease and outlive my parents. That's it. I don't know what's to come. I do know it's genetic. I can't deal with that now. I'll deal with that when I get there, but I know what I can do today. I know how I can show up for myself today, right? So that calls me to reconnect and understand my health and take it quite serious. And not that I'm perfect. I can't say I'm perfect. I told you I love sweets. So if anybody love to bake, I told you I try to bake. So if you're somebody that love to bake, let me know. I'm happy to put an order in. But in other words, it helps us to start to create just a legacy of meaning, and I think about my son who would never get a chance to meet his grandparents and his uncle and aunt, but he watched my physical activity around the house, so he stretches with me and he's jumping up and down. So I'm just leading by example, right? Setting a new tone. I didn't see that growing up. Now he get to see something different, right? I saw drug abuse. I saw, police brutality. I saw drug raids. I saw all of that. He don't get it. He don't have to see that, right? He get a chance to be exposed to something different, and I'm responsible for that, right? So the question that I want to submit to you is like, it's not how do I move past this grief, but rather how do I live fully while honoring what this loss has taught me? Because it's teaching us something. And if we get quiet, if we go into our meditation, if we go for a walk, we can begin to tap into that. I'd imagine, like Ms. Edna was saying, having to show up on a consistent basis in that environment, it takes another level of resilience and strength to be able to show up for people and hold space for them in that way. And just to know that it's a friendly face in the crowd, to know that somebody have your back. Again, it allows us to move with a lot more intention, a lot more purpose, and such a beautiful way. I do want to caution us, and we've already alluded to this, so I thank y'all for being transparent. Guilt, shame, anger, resentment, the fear of forgetting about our loved ones, these become the barriers to our ability to move forward. These become the things that halt our healing. These become the things that starts to allow the unhealthy thoughts to settle in and to begin to try to take control, right? And as we journey through grief, like several emotional obstacles can hinder this. And if we're not careful, it'll slow us up. And I appreciate you all's vulnerability. Um, um, you know, with the guilt that we can carry or the resentment we can have. I carried a lot of resentment towards my mom, growing up because of the environment she had me in, the things she exposed me to. And it was in her absence, her physical absence, that I had to learn how to forgive her, and really understand her story, because I had to learn to separate. My mom name was Veronica. I had to learn how to separate mom from Veronica, right? And if you're familiar with Dr. Kimberly Wilkerson's work, she talked about intersectionalities, how we all have multiple identities, and sometimes we all at the intersection of two, being male and being black, being a father and educated, being a woman that's educated, being a woman with a disability or whatever. We all stand at the intersection of it. And as I began to try to distinguish her identities and understand her as Veronica, right, as a woman with lived experience, it just allowed me to learn how to give her grace and to forgive her and let go of things that I had no control over and she had no control over in such a way. Right. So that guilt can be that persistent feeling of responsibility for the loss of or regret over things that was said, that was unsaid. That keeps us in this painful cycle of self-blame, and it prevents us from moving forward. That's something my sister dealt with. Her and my mom used to bump heads and have debates about things. And she said a lot of stuff that in her later years, she's like, I wish I wouldn't have said that. I wish that when it came out of my mouth, right? So when I talk about that heartache, it was the guilt she was carrying that was causing that, right? The shame, belief that our grief is inappropriate, or that others are judging our response to loss. It can cause us to really be reluctant to express ourselves because as you all said, how we express ourselves and how it looks is different for us all. And if we're not careful, we can begin to allow that to impact how we're showing up. Anger. I always say anger isn't always bad, right? Anger isn't always bad because sometimes our anger can keeps us in survival to survive. Anger is a sign that a need of ours isn't being met. So we think about anger that we may have had for love towards loved ones or situations or people. The question is what need wasn't being met, and that helps us to begin to get to the root of where that anger comes from. Because usually underneath that anger is hurt, sadness, disappointment, feeling rejected, feeling abandoned, etc. Right? So ask yourself, you're someone who's carrying some of those feelings. What's underneath that? What's underneath that for you? I think sometimes folks have this fear of forgetting about their loved ones. And I'd imagine none of us have forgotten about people we lost, situations we've been in. The thoughts may have just decreased, but it doesn't wear on us as much as as it may have once have. So it's this worry that healing or it can be this worry that like healing or finding joy again may mean that we're betraying our loved ones or forgetting about them. And that's just not the case, right? And this can cause us to unconsciously cling to the pain when our goal is to how do we live in the present. Something I said, I thought it was insensitive when I said it when I was a kid, but as I got older, I understood the wisdom in it. I was like, because my mom died, like that doesn't mean I didn't die. I'm still here. I'm still here. And if I'm quoting it right, to say, let the dead bury the dead. And I have to let her rest so that I can move on and be the best person and be the best version of myself that I can be in such a way. So I just want to encourage you to think about, are you carrying some unhealthy feelings that may be preventing you from moving forward, from growing, from healing? Because your healing, someone else's healing can be predicated on your healing. Someone else's growth or aha moment can be predicated on you being able to say, hey, I've been there. Here's how I worked through that. Like the lady is saying, as far as support of the moms, have two of them, both of them. Wow. That's something. That's something. So think about that. When we're thinking about ways to cope, ways to move forward, ways to be, breathing becomes something that I think sometimes we take for granted. There's no cost to breathing at all for those of us who are able to breathe on our own. And when we were able to begin to regulate our breathing and be intentional with it, it really just helps us to decrease our nervous system. So if you ever find yourself tense, if you ever find yourself feeling anxious about something, just take a moment, take a deep inhale, a deep exhale. A lot of professionals recommend a 4 count. Some people do an 8 count. Depends on your lung capacity, of course. But it's being able to what they call box breathing. Breathing in for a few seconds, holding it, and allowing that air to come out. Right. It helps us to regulate our nervous system. It also allows the blood to flow back into our body because when we're tense, when we're anxious, right, that's how blood clots start. That's when our heart doesn't get the full pump that it needs to function. So it just helps us to reduce our stress. Movement. Sometimes it's hard to talk, as we say. Sometimes we don't got the words to say. Sometimes I don't want to talk about it, and I don't care how you feel about it. I just don't want to talk. But what are some other ways we can express ourselves, right? Can we walk? Can we dance? Can we swim? Can we do yoga? Can we hit the gym? Those becomes healthy outlets for us to express ourselves. get that energy out. If you're someone who's carrying guilt or shame or anger, consider these being ways to, if it's hard to talk about it right now, consider it being ways to get some of that energy out, right? Because energy comes to us and flows through us, right? We all are energy. That's emotions, it's energy and motion. So us being able to get that energy out allows it to be in a productive way and not a constructive way. Because if we're not careful, we may cut somebody out, we may hit somebody, we may cause harm in ways, we may get addicted to things. And we want to be careful with that. So being able to move ourselves, move our body becomes ever more important. And expressive activities. You heard me allude to this a bit earlier. Journaling helps. Writing is the highest form of thought. It's a form of meditation, right? Where you can sit and get out what's in your head on paper, and sometimes just look back and be like, "Wow, like this is what's on my mind." But it becomes a way to purge. It becomes a way to release, because people are judgmental. Sometimes people won't get it. Sometimes people are rude and critical and cruel. And at times you got to get with yourself and be able to journal. Ways that you can do so, you can write goodbye letters to loved ones. You can write future letters to your children as a way to honor your legacy. You can write letters of forgiveness, if you will. Something that I'm doing now with my son. I write him letters in his journal, I acknowledging what I'm seeing, giving him words of encouragement, hyping him up. And my hope is that one day he'll be able to have, and I got it right here on my desk, just have a little book that when he needs something to pull from mom and dad, he can, go to the book to say, this was going on at 2 years old, or this what my parents thought of me at this age. Right. Again, just finding ways to express, because now I get to give him something that in some ways that I didn't get, certain questions that I have that I never get answers to. I get a chance to help share some of that knowledge and that wisdom with him. Music, all of those things, all of these expressive ways to help us, you know, and a question that if you're looking for a prompt in your writing, if you're someone who's looking, a question you can ask yourself is, what's something I wish I could say to them, you know? And if writing is a way for you to do that, what would you say? How much you missed them, how much you loved them, how much you appreciated them for what they did, how much you forgive them for what they didn't do or couldn't do. Um, if you want to write, or sometimes it's talking. I'm someone, people might think I'm a little crazy, but I'll sit and talk, and I'll walk outside and go for a walk, and I'll just talk to my mom, Mom, I miss you. I wish you could see what I'm doing, or thank you for your strength, or thank you for teaching me how to be courageous, whatever it is, right? It allows us to usher in that spirit, and it keeps a level of comfort, if you will. Um, so all of this allows us to just do a heart check, right? I think I think sometimes folks think we always judge by our actions and behavior. I also argue that I think we judge by our heart posture, So you got to check in with your heart, and asking yourself what you need today, to Miss Green, I think Miss Tracy, I can't see the name right now, who's connected more with the siblings, being able to sit with that is a year and a half, it is still fresh, What do I need today? How is this grief showing up in my body? How am I using this time with my siblings to help us feel more connected? So that we can continue to move with it together, right? So these are just some ideas, some suggestions for you to consider as you're journeying through whatever you're experiencing, as you're living with the decisions you've made, as you maybe transition into a new role, a new way of living. Maybe you're detaching from an old identity you once had, and learning to embrace a new version of yourself, which is grief, can be grief as well, because it's like I thought I liked this. I thought I liked that person. I thought we was going, it can come up with a lot of emotions. And just being able to sit in that goes a long way. So I'll pause there. And I just want to open it up for any other questions. This is my last slide. I figured we would end a little early because I don't want to stand in the way of y'all and some food. But thank you so much for engaging. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for being in the space. I did want to leave some time in case folks had questions, thoughts, pushbacks. I'm not a debating man, but I'm always open to other perspectives because I'm willing to learn. Yeah, and I'll pause there. Miss Jackson, I can see now. If you're saying something, you're muted.
We also have a comment in the chat.
Okay. What they saying?
So we have, I don't know if you want to stop sharing your screen or not, but everyone, you can always stay in contact with Walter. It's walter@causeengagement.com. It's what he has on the screen. And so when you were speaking, Reverend Jenkins typed in the chat, 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 4, we are to comfort others with the same comfort that we receive. That's what Tawana is doing. And then Reverend Jenkins says that music helps me go through.
Oh yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that scripture is spot on. It speaks very well to Miss Boston. Indeed. Any questions, thoughts, comments from maybe something you heard? Maybe you heard something new. Maybe you heard this somewhere else and maybe heard it in a different iteration. Just want to invite your voices. You can put it in the chat as well if that's helpful.
Tawana says, thank you for this information.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I will come off really quick to just say thank you so much. It's always helpful when we come together to help each other through grief. Our pastor teaches us and tells us and reminds us all the time that grief is not brief. And again, I'm just starting out, but I love hearing from those who have been on this journey for a really long time. And I was just with someone not too long ago, and they were saying that their mom passed like 32 years ago, and it feels like yesterday. And I was like, whoa, you got work to do, because I don't want that to be my testimony. I don't want that to be, my story, even though I want her to always be a part of who I am. I could not imagine 32 years later and it's still feeling like yesterday. And I understand that we all grieve differently. So if that's your journey, that's your journey. I'm just saying, for me, I don't, my prayer is that it gets easier over time, not with time, but through God and his healing power, and just trusting God to do it. So I just know that for me, every time I have an opportunity to step into these spaces and learn from other people who are going through and traveling the same journey, I heal and I become better every single time. So thank you.
Absolutely. May your mom's spirit comfort you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, it's been 7 years, almost 8 years next month for me and my siblings. And we have a sibling chat that we check on each other every day just to make sure everybody is doing well. And we try to get together at least once a year to honor her. And I have tried several times to make some of her favorite recipes. I can cook food, but can't really bake. So I'm still working on the cakes. But it's next month will be 8 years. We miss her tremendously, but we often, when we communicate with each other, think about the happy moments, right? And she was very bossy, so we would think about, things that she would say that would make us laugh. So I'm with Pastor Tracy. I don't want to be like feeling 30 some years from now like it was yesterday, because I think my loved ones wouldn't want us to be stuck. I think they would want us to, honor the memories that we have of them. And even if the relationship was a little bit rocky, because not everybody relationship with the loved one that passed was great. People have I've met people that's very angry, upset, because they didn't get to fix or repair that relationship before that person passed. And I would encourage anyone, if you have rocky relationships and that person is still living, if you can, on your part, try as hard as you can to repair. They may not receive it, but it's for you, so that your heart don't feel like it's coming through your chest if they don't make it, right? But if the relationship was rocky and you trying to still get through your journey and you're struggling, you can don't be afraid to like ask for help. Like, don't be afraid to see a good therapist, to talk through what you're experiencing. I think our culture, we depending on where and when you grew up, you didn't go see a therapist, but it's nothing wrong with seeing a therapist to get through your journey. I always say every one of us need a checkup from the neck up. So it's nothing wrong with that, but I'm glad that me and my siblings are able to get together, honor my mom, but we are together laughing about the happy moments.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, way to maximize and capitalize on that, because it only brings you all closer for sure. And as a therapist myself, and not to be biased, but yes, it's so great to sit across from someone and talk and get it off your chest and dump. You gain strength by that and you gain clarity. Absolutely. I see Reverend Jenkins put in the chat, is there a difference between grief and sorrow? Yes, in my opinion. I would say grief is the process that we have when we transition, lose people, when we have changes. And I would say sorrow is the emotion that we may feel, right? So grief is that deep, complex, that's that everyday feeling like that we have, or that moment when we think about or when we remember. And then that sadness is connected more to the emotion side of it. So you could think of journey as like grief as the long journey, and sorrow as one of the emotions that we carry along that journey at times. But I'd be curious if anyone has a different way of looking at that, or thinking about grief or sorrow. Hopefully that helps, Reverend Jenkins. But great question. Great question. Cool. Any other thoughts, questions at all? I really appreciate you all engaging and just allowing your energy to be in this space. And I did have one more thought I wanted to share. It's Ms. Boston was saying, if you carrying something and that person's still alive, to try to make peace, you right. If there is an opportunity to make peace for yourself, right? Because you can't control how other people feel and what they think, but it's for you. It's for you. And any anger, any resentment, any hate, any unforgiveness that you carry, it's like you picking up a hot rock to throw it. But remember, it's you that be burned first, right? Before you cast that stone, it's you that's burned first. So you being able to let that hot rock sit and not touch it allows you to move along with your journey. But that's my time. I'll yield the floor to Ms. Jackson. Thank y'all so much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Ms. Jackson, you want to close us out?
Yes, thank you everyone for participating in today's session hosted by the Healthy Heart Learning Collaborative, a program of the Maryland Department of Health. The Healthy Heart Learning Collaborative is something that's ongoing. And so we do have your contact information, and the collaborative will plan more peer learning sessions on different topics such as stroke awareness, anything related to heart disease, cardiovascular disease. Again, the members of the Healthy Heart Learning Collaborative made the suggestions for the topics. And also, if at any point the Healthy Heart Learning Collaborative is recruiting for new members, we'll be sure to reach out to you all as well to see if that's something that you would be interested in. In the meantime, in the chat, and then I'll follow up via email as well, there is the link. And if you can please take about 3 minutes to complete that survey, that will help us with future decision making and justification for peer learning sessions such as this. So everyone, thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.